Spiritual Radio. This is AchieveRadio.com. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/AchieveRadio.
Hi, I'm Anne-Marie, and you are listening to Achieve Spiritual, Holistic, and Self-Improvement Radio. And today's guest is Judi Miller, a highly successful CPA and corporate finance executive who, unknown to her coworkers, hey, like a lot of us who have secrets or things going on, she lived in terror of the night and the possibility of sexual assault. She was happily married, with children, and her fears made life a modern-day nightmare. But worse, she had no idea why. There was nothing in her own personal background that would warrant this near-constant state of fear. And in her new book, Perfect, A Path to Love, Forgiveness, and Transformation, she relates the extraordinary path she took to discover the root of those fears. It's a pretty amazing journey that Judi was guided to take, and it brought the exact right people together in the exact right order to right a wrong committed decades ago before her birth, but which left its shadow on her soul. And today you'll hear from her personally about the spiritual journey that unfolded, which opened her heart, established forgiveness across multiple generations, and showed her the perfection of all that we are. And today, introducing Judi. Hi, Judi.
It's great to be here, Anne-Marie. Thank you.
Well, it's great to be with you. I think I think one of us has a very, possibly a video on or something in the background, maybe? Don't know. I have my sound off. There you are, sweetheart. I see you. All right. So, Judi, I know that you have a pretty intense story. So, what was the nucleus of that fear? And what established you to write this book?
Sure, I think that's a great story. So, as a child, like many children, I had fears. Mine was I had a fear of drowning, but I was terrified of the dark, and I was also terrified of sexual assault. I'd never been assaulted, so as a child, this feeling and this fear was very, very confusing. I actually never shared it with anyone until this book came out. So Anne-Marie, every night I would literally crawl into bed, pull the covers over my head, and I would recite the Lord's Prayer over and over again until literally I would fall asleep exhausted. And this was my ritual as a child, night after night. And, it continued well into my 20s. I started my career as a CPA or certified public accountant, so there I was going to work during the day and then crawling back into bed at night, terrified of what I couldn't explain. And
how did you sleep? Did you sleep very well?
No, I did not sleep very well, but I met my husband at work, and we actually got married. And in the exhaustion of raising two incredible kids, commuting 3 hours a day to work and working 40 to 50 hours a week, in that exhaustion, everything stopped. The terror stopped, the energy stopped, the spirits, the subtle whispers, everything went away. And then my kids grew up, and then they went off to college, and the house became silent. And in that silence, everything returned. The energies, the spirits, the terror, It felt like someone or something was always standing next to me, behind me. There were eyes staring at me from across the room. And then at night, I literally would wake up terrified, clutching at my husband in fear. And we both began to lose sleep. You're asking about me. Now it's both of us losing sleep. So around the same time, I actually started to bleed uncontrollably month after month. And I went to see my doctor, and she said that I needed to have a hysterectomy. And Amory, I was terrified of this surgery. I had actually, after becoming a CPA, I went into finance in the healthcare industry for over 20 years, and I trust modern medicine implicitly. But I was terrified of this surgery, and it felt like the same terror that I had as a child and the same terror that returned to me as an adult. So a very good friend of mine recommended that I read a book called Light Emerging by Barbara Brennan. And Barbara was a former NASA physicist, and she actually studied the human energy field. And what she learned, she was actually able to heal people with her hands. So literally, days before my surgery, there I was, Googling healers near me. And as I sat across from my healer for that very first time, I'm extremely auditory. I literally heard the click of a lock, like my entire life was finally locking into place. But Amory, I didn't know the role that that healer would actually play in my family's history. So the healer helped me heal after my hysterectomy, and in the following months, we actually started to explore this unexplainable terror that I had of the night. We never talked about the fear of sexual assault. So we started to look at my childhood experiences. Was there anything from my childhood that elicited it? But nothing came to light. Then we started to talk about past lives, and past lives was actually something I had never heard of. She introduced me to the work of Dr. Brian Weiss. Dr. Weiss was actually a very prominent psychiatrist. He studied at Columbia and Yale, and he actually had a patient named Catherine who had also these unexplainable fears. And by accident, through hypnosis, he was actually able to take her to past lives, and the understanding of where those fears came from, she was actually able to be healed. We also talked about the work of Dr. Michael Newton, Dolores Cannon, and I was really, really amazed by all of this. We also started to talk about my parents. We all know that we get so many things from our parents. Through our DNA, we get the color of our hair, the color of our eyes, other physical characteristics. But a relatively new science called the Science of Epigenetics actually says we can inherit the pain and the trauma from our parents and our ancestors. They've actually shown Holocaust survivors where their children and their grandchildren can often hold the same terror and pain in their own bodies. And they've done research with mice where they've actually been able to prove the exact same thing. So that pain and that terror and that fear of sexual assault wasn't actually my own. It was actually a cellular memory from my mother. They say, Amory, they say every female baby is born with 2 to 3 million of their reproductive eggs at birth, and many scientists believe that they actually don't produce any more after that. So for much of your mother's life, you were actually there on a cellular level, experiencing the same triumphs and traumas that she did. So again, this pain and this trauma that I felt every night really was a cellular memory from my mother. But Amory, the story doesn't end there. There's actually a shocking past life connection to the very healer that I trusted in this lifetime to heal me. She was actually the person who inflicted the pain on my family. But you know something? In that moment of revelation, I could have felt fear, I could have felt anger, maybe even betrayal, but I didn't. All I felt was the love and perfection of the universe, and I saw how all of our souls are interconnected across lifetimes, and how we're unconditionally loved and accepted, and how we can heal in this lifetime or in any other. And, I could have, like I said, I could have created a story that would haunt me for the rest of my life, but I chose to see the miracle in the situation. And that's why I decided to write Perfect, because I see so many people hurting in the world that I just wanted to share this message of hope and inspiration with them.
So you feel that this book is specifically for the people going through what you are, Judi?
So I believe my story is a little unusual and a little uncommon, so many people may not be able to actually relate specifically to the events of the story, but Anne-Marie, for most of my life, and maybe you felt this way, or maybe even your listeners, I felt different, like I didn't belong. I felt incomplete. always searching maybe for someone or something to make me feel whole. I felt unworthy, always having to prove myself. So these feelings literally have plagued me for most of my life. But on this journey, I learned how to let go of those stories that are not real, that no longer serve us, so we could all experience true freedom and happiness. And that's what I teach.
Are you a motivational speaker?
So most of my career I've been in finance. It's actually only recently, in February of this year, right before COVID, I stopped my finance profession so I can write, publish, and speak this book.
Awesome. Okay, so in a nutshell, what is the high-level summary of your book for your readers?
So what I mentioned before, that was kind of a summary of the book. The book is actually broken up into 3 parts, right? So 80% of it is written like a novel, because most people actually don't read past the first 19 pages. So I wanted them to pick up perfect and to actually experience it with me, right? And then there's a handful of pages, which I call reflections, that kind of cull out what are some of the key lessons in the book so that they could apply it in their own lives. And then there are some very, very simple exercises. And I made them purposely simple because I know how busy we all are. But it's to help them embody the principles. So if I had to summarize the book in a nutshell, basically, you said the subtitle to my book is A Path to Love, Forgiveness, and Transformation, right? But what does forgiveness actually mean? There are so many different definitions of forgiveness, but for me, it's really, really simple. It means to let go of the contracted negative stories that no longer serve us. So painful and unwanted events are going to happen to all of us. We could either experience it once, or we could play it over and over again, literally hundreds, even thousands of times until it becomes our identity. So for me, forgiveness is letting go of those stories. It's not condoning the actions of another person. It's just getting us out of that cycle of victimhood.
So, would you say that in the same way that many of us victimize ourselves by creating repeat over and over and over episodes that are way too much alike, not realizing that we're self-sabotaging our own journey, in what way would you say that forgiveness is different for each person when they finally realize what they're doing? And how do they forgive the people that have wronged them on their journey? Because each of us has people in our life that have wronged us, or even in your case, as you said, it was somebody from a past life. So how do people forgive? And why is that important?
Right. So why is it important to forgive, right? So when we're hanging on to those stories, right? Again, we're not condoning the actions of another person. It's just letting go of that cycle of victimhood. There's a quote, and I think it's attributed to Mandela. Resentment is drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. So you hanging on to that trauma and that pain in your body is not hurting the other person. You're hurting yourself. Forgiveness truly is a gift that we give ourselves. It's an act of self-love. So, Amory, there are over 60,000, everybody has over 60,000 thoughts a day. 95% of them are the same ones we had yesterday and the same ones we had the day before. 80% of them, 80% of them are quite negative. As humans, we are hardwired to focus on, notice, and think about the negative aspects of a situation. Millions of years ago, when we were cavemen and cavewomen, it was important for our survival. It was critical. But we no longer live in that reality, so we need to retrain our minds to not focus on the negatives, so we can let go of those stories that we keep telling ourselves.
But it is true that we do get caught in a record of repeat songs over and over. You're right. And I've always thought it was kind of bizarre, too, as a reader, how many people will actually be attracted to when they have a chance to be free of their life story, to go right to another person with the same name, the same look, and the same kind of conditions that ran them ragged before. And so
Hmm.
it is very strange how we all do that at times.
I love that comment because I actually write about it in the book. So, like I mentioned, I always felt different. I was born in Trinidad and moved to the U.S. when I was very young. I was born with 11 fingers. I didn't look like other people in my
What? Let
neighborhood.
me
It's not a,
see.
it's not,
Let me see your 11 fingers.
well,
I
it
want to
was
see them.
removed what it was removed when I was 13, so I
Oh,
don't have them
darn,
anymore.
darn.
But I could also feel and sense spirit. So because of those reasons, I felt different. So Amory, what did I do? The law of attraction. What we focus on, what we hold in our bodies is just reflected back to us. We attract that to us, right? So what did I attract into my life? My husband. My husband is different culturally, racially, spiritually, and religiously. He's the opposite of me. And for my entire life with my husband's family, I always felt like I didn't belong. I literally put a barrier around my heart because I didn't want them to hurt me. I didn't want to feel that they didn't love me or I didn't belong. And then when my mother-in-law passed away, um, I can't explain how this works. I'm not a medium, but she came to visit me and I was literally communicating with her. And she showed me every scene. It went by literally in seconds. She showed me every scene that I had with my husband and his family. And in the scenes, what I realized was because I felt different, I made myself different. And that was the experience that I had. So what we hold, those emotions and those traumas that we are holding on to, life just reflects it back to us in the experiences that we have. So that's why it's important to let go. And that's why we keep attracting the same people and the same situations.
I think I get it, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, how do we disrupt that existing story? I mean, I understand what you said, but I'm still not quite understanding how you disrupt that existing story so that you don't play it repeatedly. I hear what you're saying about your mother-in-law and seeing the scenes and the feeling of wrapping a protection around yourself all the time, expecting to become the victim or whatever. But how do you disrupt that? Tell me that
Hmm.
again.
I love your questions. So I have an acronym, I call it NEST, and this is what I do. So N, the N stands for notice, observe, become aware of your thoughts. Remember, we have 60,000 thoughts a day, right? Many of us are just on autopilot. So between Stephen Covey, who wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, said between stimulus and response is our greatest superpower, our power to decide. So what that means for me is between stimulus and response, there's a gap. In that gap, I choose how I react. Do I play that same story over and over again? Do I experience this as emotions in my body and then let them go? Do I create a story based on love or based on fear? So first, the first most important thing is to observe and become aware of our thoughts because we're on autopilot most of the time. So that's the N. Then the E is to experience our emotions in our body. So what I mean by that is so many of us are not trained to truly feel our emotions. We're either afraid to feel it or taught not to feel it. You know, big girls, boys don't cry, things like that, right? We think about our emotions instead of actually feeling them as sensations in our bodies. So Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor wrote a book called My Stroke of Insight. And she was a Harvard neuroscientist who was able to heal herself from traumatic brain injury. But she talks about the 90-second rule. When an event happens, either good or bad, it takes us 90 seconds to truly feel the sensations and the emotions of that event, literally in our bodies, and then let them go. If it lasts more than 90 seconds, we've actually started to create a story. So the first thing is to truly learn to feel our emotions. You know, if you want to cry, cry. If you have to scream, scream. But truly acknowledge and feel that emotions in your body. The body tells the truth. The mind creates the story. And we all have examples of stories we've created in our minds that are not true, right? So a very simple thing. My neighbor was supposed to come over and she didn't come over. And I'm like, okay, it's a half an hour later. She's still not here. What did I do wrong? She doesn't like me anymore. So finally I picked up the phone and called her. And she said, oh, I thought it was tomorrow. But see how quickly our minds go to the negative and creating those stories,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
Right. So we need to experience those emotions truly in our body. And I know it sounds easy, but it's you've heard this analogy before. You can't expect to go to the gym and be transformed overnight. You need to truly train yourself to feel your emotions and acknowledge them. So that's
Jude,
the E. Sorry, go ahead.
what do you think of the Facebook syndrome, where people begin to feel as if they are worthless if they're not getting a million likes? How do people stop? How do people stop judging themselves on a social networking thing? I mean, I know this isn't in your book, but we're only at 22, a few minutes, and we have a lot of time to go. So I'm just shooting the poop with you here. So, you know, my feeling is that a lot of people are lost. I'm sure you and I have both seen how many people are creating an image and a life story for themselves by what is on Facebook, on and the pictures and the you know what I'm saying? It's all created so that there's a huge popularity lifestyle going real or unreal, and many people find that they judge their self-worth, and I would imagine a few suicides have been created by the lack of the life story that they are carrying through to their imaginary audience. Not the audience of a show like this, you know, because people will watch this afterwards, and I'm not worried about how many are here today. But on Facebook, it seems so important to so many. I'm just, this is just kind of shooting the poop with you, and so I'm just kind of asking you.
So it's not related to Facebook, but when I moved to the US, right? I was, like I said, I was very young. I lived in the projects, and I didn't realize that we didn't have a lot, right? And you hear about this when you go to visit countries, you know, that aren't as developed as the US. You know, you see these people in poverty and they're happy. So when I moved here, I didn't realize that we didn't have anything. And it was me in the comparison.
Wow.
When I started to compare myself to other people, it was the stories that I created about lack, or I wasn't good enough because I didn't have X, Y, or Z. So a lot of those stories we create for ourselves. So, you know, if Facebook makes you feel contracted, maybe you shouldn't be on social media as much. I don't know. But I know for me it was because I was comparing myself to others. I had a story of lack.
Yeah. So you feel that basically that people that are, but how do you can't do that. I mean, that's what they should do. But what I'm saying is there's a lot of kids out there that, because of lack and because they aren't as fortunate as you were in the projects to realize how blessed and how happy you were, and then later realizing, oh, I don't have as much as her or him. These kids, some of them have been born in money and they still feel lacking. They
Mm-hmm.
still feel lost. And the feeling is that they're lost because they don't know how to create a life story. And you're right, the 60,000 thoughts going through their head is all self-criticism. How do you take your child, perhaps, that you see this happening to, and know that you can tell them, we give you your book, or do we help them? Can we help them to interrupt this sabotaging fake life that they're creating
Hmm.
on
So,
social services, on social networking.
right. So for me, remember I mentioned I use the acronym NEST, and it serves me.
Mm.
So N was the notice and observe and become aware of the thoughts. The E was to truly feel the emotion. So when you feel that contraction of being compared or not enough, really feel it in your body and then let it go. And the S, exactly what you said, scratch that record so that story can no longer play. So I think the S and the T will answer your question. So, when you start to have that negative story, literally flick it off before it becomes a blaze, before it takes root. Flick it off. You can do it by saying cancel, cancel, cancel clear, replace it with a more empowering story. The other one that you've heard is people had rubber bands on their wrists and they snap it. And I believe the reason
Oh
that
yeah.
helps is it helps because it gets people out of their heads and back into their bodies, right? And then also, do something zany or crazy. When my husband and I get into an argument, we'll grab each other by the nose and we start laughing. And it just really disrupts the story that we can't argue anymore, right? So you really do exactly what you said. You really do need to scratch that record so it can no longer play. And then the last one I think is extremely important, which is the T, which is tender love and care. So I believe so many people feel lonely, isolated, not enough. And a lot of this is what you're saying with social media and kids. They feel all of those things, the isolations, the disconnection. And I don't think it's because of isolation from each other. I honestly believe it's because when we become disconnected from ourselves, and it becomes disconnected from the Creator. So I believe right now, more than ever, it's so important, especially with our children, to have self-love and self-care because we've abandoned ourselves on so many levels, emotionally, spiritually, physically. So self-love and self-care is important. And I believe every time we spend time with ourselves and getting to know ourselves, we reconnect with the essence of who we are, which is already whole, perfect, and complete. And I know it's challenging because I have two children of my own where there's so
I
much
was going to
comparison
ask
out
you that.
there.
I was going to ask you. I heard Dr. Phil once say, um, and I've heard a lot of psychiatrists say that it's always easy to go to an office to tell their clients how that they need to help themselves, but with their own kids, sometimes that's the hardest thing of all, to be able to know these wise things, and yet with their own, it's like, ah, dad, ah, mom, shut the hell up. I mean, it's just, what I'm saying is, how do you communicate these messages to your children?
Right, definitely making sure that they're aware of the self-love and all the things that I mentioned, physically with the food they eat, getting exercise, being in nature, praying, meditating, all of those things, emotionally, focusing on gratitude, focusing on love, the highest vibrations in the universe. And also, many people feel that love is outside of themselves, like they have to get it from someone else or something else to make them feel whole. But Anne-Marie, we're already love, right? So one of the things that I discovered quite by accident, and I think it's so important for all people, not just children, to know, is that we can create that feeling of love in an instant by ourselves. And the way that I discovered it by accident is when I was on my healer's table, week after week. She would work on me for 15 to 45 minutes. And I had nothing to do, right? I was laying there with my eyes closed, and I would actually picture people that I love. I would picture my husband or my kids or I would picture my dog. My dog thinks he's a cat. So every time I think about him, I just start laughing. I would picture a beautiful sunset. I would see and experience my first snowfall, the first kiss, but I wasn't just seeing it. I was experiencing it. What was I feeling, seeing, tasting, touching? And I literally felt it throughout my body. And again, I was laying there for 15 to 45 minutes, so I was bringing in numbers, pictures after picture. And my mentor, Dr. Sue, taught me this. Once you've magnified that feeling, magnify 10 times even more. And put your hand on your heart and say, this love is for me. This love is me. It's not dependent on anyone or anything.
Awesome. So Dr. Sue was your mentor?
Dr. Sue Mort is one of my mentors, yes. She wrote the book, The Energy Codes. I'm actually an energy codes facilitator.
Ah, okay. I don't mean to get off track. I'm just trying to keep things human here. I mean, you are the almighty author, right? So we need to keep things here human. So okay, so we have discussed how we can get out of our heads, but especially people are having a hard time during COVID, aren't they? I mean, with people being, I feel so sorry for the old elder people that are still living at home, and they're having healthcare workers drop in, and they're so they feel so alone and unloved, and how is there anything we can do when we ourselves or the people that we see, our parents or the elders on our street, what can we do to help with that?
hmm Right. So the exercise that we just went through only takes minutes, but if you do it, you'll be amazed at how much love
Ah,
you could
okay.
generate and how much you can open your heart. But since you're talking about COVID, I'd love to just share something really quickly. Um,
Sure.
so that first past life regression that I had with Dr. Weiss, it was in a group setting. There were literally hundreds, maybe even thousands of people in that auditorium. And I was amazed because I had never heard of this before, right? And I was so excited. My heart was open. I was ready. I was open-minded, and I fell asleep. I fell asleep through the hypnosis and slept through the whole thing. So when my healer offered to do a past life regression in her office, I jumped at the opportunity. And as I was laying on her table, I literally was rising through like a purple haze and then out into this bright white light. And I was just surrounded by love. And Amory, the message is we can all come home by loving and accepting who we are exactly as we are. The joy is in the reunion and the remembrance of who we are. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because we can all come home. And it's so funny for me that during COVID-19, we're all being sent home. And it's similar to what I was saying before. Some of that loneliness and that isolation is because we've become disconnected from the Creator, from ourselves. That's why during these times we need to focus on that self-love, that self-care, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, because we have abandoned ourselves. So many of us have.
Question. Another unrelated question. Um, in your mind, and I don't care if it's in the book or not, how do you think that COVID has affected spiritually the world most of all, in your opinion? Quick, quick.
No, so I have two answers to you. I have two answers for you. So I'll tell you the first answer. The first answer is I talked to many people who've truly had a very difficult time. They've had loved ones who've passed away. They've lost jobs, and I understand, how much pain and suffering there is out there. But I've also talked to people who've taken this as an opportunity, and you may have even heard this. They call it a reset, an opportunity to
Yes.
reconnect more with their families, more with themselves. So there is a huge gap between how people are experiencing COVID. The other answer that I have for you is, remember I said I felt different most of my life?
Mm-hmm.
And when people said hurtful things, I literally felt it in my chest. It felt like an elephant sitting on my chest and I couldn't breathe. And I learned to
Mm-hmm.
really breathe into those sensations. When we breathe the breath of life into those sensations, they actually start to soften and we can start to let them go. And the reason I mention that is because now when I feel a contraction in my body, I know it's an opportunity for me to release something. I'm holding on to a story labeled judgment and emotion that I haven't processed. It's an opportunity for me to release and heal it. So in the world, all of this that's happening with COVID and the fires and the hurricanes and everything going on,
Yeah.
there's so much contraction going on, right? But in that contraction, what it tells me is that it's an opportunity for us to heal the planet. It's an opportunity for us to heal our relationships.
Yes. I agree with that very much. Um, so you feel that the exercise that you used before was your way to be able to connect with your true self through that kind of process of the beautiful memories and the beautiful thoughts and amping it up. Is that what you feel is the practice that we need to do to connect with our true selves?
So that's one. The other one is, remember, we all have stories that play like on that record player we were talking about, right? Because
Right.
we are human. So again, acknowledge where you feel it in your body. We talked about this before. Breathe the breath of life into it. And I mentioned to you that I'm a energy codes facilitator for Dr. Sue. So one of the things she talks about is central channel breathing. So we have our chakra system. So we start above our head, we go through the center line of our brain, through the center line of our throat, the center line of our heart, center of our solar plexus, center of our pelvis, and down into the earth. And then we reverse course and we breathe through those central chakra areas and back out the top. So you could breathe up and down your central channel. And if you have a contracted energy, remember, if there is something hurtful that's happened, where do you feel it in your body? Get back into your body. Right? We're meant to experience life in our bodies, not in our heads. And as you breathe up and down that channel, grab that area and bring it into the central channel and breathe through your chakra systems. And the more you do this, again, the more you will start to feel those contracted negative energies start to soften and maybe even go away.
That sounds like a very cool chakra exercise. I like that.
Mm-hmm. And why is it so important to clear our chakras and our energy systems? All of these emotions, judgments, labels get stuck in our energy field, literally get stuck in our energy field.
And
And I believe it,
create like attracts like, right?
exactly. And it distorts all these things that are stuck in our energy. I call them blocks. All these blocks stuck in our energy field distorts our ability to see life accurately. So you may have heard of this analogy before. You put pink glasses on and everything appears pink, right? So it's the same thing. When you got a lot of gunk in that energy field, it's going to distort your reality. And they say that the pain and the trauma that we feel in our body actually starts in the energy field first and then manifests in our body.
Did you, when you started to go through your journey, did you join groups? Did you join meditation circles? Did you do? You discussed mentors. You also discussed that you had what is the guy that wrote Conversations with God? Isn't he one of the people that you also mentioned?
So Neil Donald Walsh wrote a book called The Little Soul in the Sun, and I believe it's such a beautiful way to convey forgiveness and what happens on earth. But to answer your question specifically, a lot of my life I felt alone. I felt alone because I didn't feel that I had a support group that would understand me, that would understand these fears, that would understand, sensing and feeling spirit and hearing subtle whispers. I didn't feel people would understand. I felt very alone. And when I started on this journey that started on Good Friday, around the same time, I started to surround myself with loving and supportive people. And I think that's so important.
It is
Yeah.
very much so.
Because we're not alone. There are I discovered that people have so many beautiful and amazing gifts. And I know that you do as well. So it's okay for us to share that with people because we will find other people like ourselves to enjoy life with.
I know for myself, I live in a very small country town that is on some winding blacktop of America. Like a lot of spiritual people that have found that sometimes being alone does not necessarily a bad thing. if you have small circles of common folk, common meaning think like you, and you can join them, whether it's by internet or whether it's by phone or whether it's in person with masks on or distancing, which we do. I think that those groups of common-minded people are all around, and so many people refuse to reach out to them, and or they don't understand that sometimes just checking on your browser in your local area. Sometimes it's an Al-Anon group. Sometimes it's a church. Sometimes if you're lucky enough to have like-minded folks around, you meet them through the little spiritual places you go to. But I think that you're right. It's those people. People are so important. And I think when you are a natural lone wolf, I am a natural lone wolf, but I also love my alone time. But I also have realized that being alone is only fun if I have two sisterhoods that I can bond with for maybe 1 hour a month and just be able to share my spiritual thoughts, my feelings, negative feelings, my positive feelings, what I feel about the world and what's going on. It makes my day, it makes my month. And I think that you're so right. People are important, even to lone wolves. Every lone wolf needs somebody, some group out there. And yes, being married, a lot of people think being married is the answer to everything. It ain't. And I think that it's important to realize that sometimes having a strong sisterhood or group of people to be with is just as fulfilling a marriage as having one person in your life married to. And I think that, yes, that's what I'm saying in agreement.
And Anne-Marie, I agree with you 100%. For a large part of my life, I was painfully shy. And, I had, like I mentioned, when I started this journey, I had people around me to support me, but they were all over the internet. Not one person actually lived in the same place that I did. I had a friend in Norway, two in Thailand, two in Canada, one on the West Coast. So, yeah, technology allows us to connect, as we know so well these days during COVID. But that's how we connected in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. And then did you find that you began to meet these people in person by any chance?
We met once a year. But we would try to connect at least, maybe every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks on the internet.
Yeah, or Zoom, as everybody's been doing lately. I think that one of the things that's been beautiful about Zoom for my family, I come from a family of intellectuals who write books, are either religious zealots, or they all have some kind of mission in life that they become intellectually impassioned by. And yet every single one of us is a bit of a lone wolf. Even the groups that I have contact with that I call my sisterhood, each one of those women is unique, but she's also kind of a lone wolf. And my feeling is that it is what brings us together to know that a small hour can be as powerful for 1 month or for 2 months as talking every day on the phone or anything like that. It gives that motivation, that passion, that spirit to stay positive, to do and practice what you're talking about.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
So lastly, I guess, what is the message you want your readers to walk away from your book with?
So my book is all about letting go of our stories, right? So similar to what I was saying before, I think the most important thing is when we let go of the stories, labels, and judgments, we see everything through the eyes of the Creator, through the eyes of love. where there is no separation.
Awesome. That's beautiful. And one other thing that I think I missed that we were going to talk about also, and how has your life changed going through this journey? I know you've mentioned a lot of things. Do you see your genetic fears being passed down in your children? Do you see any of the things that you discussed that happened to you from your parents? Do you see that happening in any way with your own?
So some Native American cultures believe that the the traumas and triumphs of our ancestors go back 7 generations and forward 7 generations. And I've actually seen where my daughter, as a child, had fears, not like my fears. She would lock herself in the room whenever we left the house. She was always afraid. And I noticed that when I went through this healing journey, her fears lifted, and I was shocked.
You mean when she saw you going through it, it became her role
No,
model to change?
no, no.
No.
I went through this experience, and I actually didn't share it with my family immediately. It took me a while to process it, to write it, to really, experience what happened and understand what happened. But I noticed as I was going through the process, her fears were being lifted.
Oh, wow.
So our triumphs and our traumas do carry forwards and backwards. And I do want to answer the other part of your question. How has my life changed? And again, I know that it sounds similar, but when we let go of our stories, labels, and judgments, we experience each moment as if it was for the first time. And when you experience life that way, it truly becomes miraculous.
That sounds extremely inspiring.
Thank you.
Yay. Okay, if I had my switchboard here, I'd give you an applause, but I don't. I was going to ask you, you just made me curious. What native tribe are you from? What is your blood?
So I'm not Native American. I'm
I
actually,
thought you said that you were.
So I said some Native American cultures believe. I'm actually
Oh.
from Trinidad, which is in the Caribbean, right off the coast of South America.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, you have kind of a Native American look. So, Trinidad is, tell me about Trinidad. Tell me about a little history about Trinidad.
Well, it's interesting because when I did 23andMe, which is the DNA test,
Did you do that?
I did, and it said South and North American Indian. So I don't know, probably way back when, plate tectonics, it was probably all interconnected. So who knows?
Probably.
There could be some Native American in there as well. But Trinidad, many people call it the Rainbow Nation because there's so many different cultures and races, all interconnected. And they also say that there's, especially in the Caribbean, there's a very strong spiritual, not spiritual like religious, but spiritual sense of awareness or openness in the world. So
We have someone that came into the chat room, and it says, "Hi, just found y'all," and it says, "You change the time trajectory just like you can within the Akashic records."
Yeah.
Do you follow the principles of the Akashic, or how do you say that? Records, that everything is written, basically, that we have gone through. Have you studied that at all?
No, I haven't, but I definitely believe a lot of the philosophies that you were just referring to. We
Yeah.
can definitely change and heal the trajectory of our souls.
Yes. And so I think Super Doogie, that's kind of, I think kind of what, is we're talking about is much of the same thing without having to be the Akashic records. Do you follow that yourself, Super Doogie? Is there any question that Judi can answer for you? Silence. Okay. All right. They found, there goes that 18 seconds of interest, 18 pages of a book, 18, you know. It is, I had to laugh when you said that because, okay, it says, that's why your daughter was heated of the, healed of the particular fears she carried. She says, that's why your daughter was healed of the particular fears she carried. Okay. Because why? What is your reasoning for that, Super Doogie? Doogie, okay. Anyway, all right. So, all I can say about that is that, sorry for delays. Yes, we're having a huge, are you getting a delay like I'm getting a delay on our video by chance?
No, not really, but I get a lot of static, so we're
Oh,
making
well,
do.
I hope that when I see this, I'm not, I see, when I look at my video, my mouth is going, but it's like one of those Asian movies, you know, where the thing is, so I guess I would just say that I am extremely happy that you joined us today. And I do want to say that as far as your DNA test you took, I have to share mine. I took one as well, and I was completely shocked. I came out with, of course, a lot of European, but when it came up with Asian
Wow.
and Portuguese and Egyptian, it went kept going, and it said that I had one of the kind of genetic maps that they led to the cradle of Eve. There's certain people that just keep going. So I'm truly a mutt. I'm truly a Heinz 57, and I guess that's why I feel like I never understood. Great show, ladies, E-Music says. Thank you, E-Music. I think that's why I've felt like I've never really belonged, because I think my genetic code is so freaking far out there in so many places, I don't know where to find it. But, okay, Super Doogie says the records are similar, was my understanding. Great show. Okay. All right. So we have 5 minutes, and I always ask my guests, you are somebody that has a lot of experience with possibly hypnotherapy, or do you have a favorite prayer or a favorite short hypnotherapy you like to use, or would you like to use the chakra meditation one more time for all of us?
Sure. So I know 2 prayers, and if you're not religious, it's not religious at all. You can call it a recipe. One, many people know because it's become very popular recently, which is the Ho'oponopono, which is I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. But I would love to kind of do I could do the forgiveness prayer, John Newton's forgiveness prayer. And it's not, like you said, it's not just forgiving other people, it's forgiving ourselves, right? So if you want, I could do it by memory, hopefully.
Please do.
And you and your listeners can close your eyes if it's safe to do so. And under the stress of doing it live and on video, I may forget it. But think of something that you need to let go of, right? And just close your eyes and infinite creator, all that you are, for all the listeners, their family, all their relations, all their ancestors and all their relations through all relevant space, time, and connections. Please help them all forgive each other, forgive themselves, forgive all people, and all people forgive them completely and totally, please and thank you. So that's just a short version of it. It's actually a long page. So if you'd like, I could keep on going, but I don't know time limits.
I don't either. I'm looking at 5:57. I think maybe possibly we should say goodbye now so we
Okay.
don't have to cut you off in the middle of a beautiful prayer. But thank you so much, Judy, for visiting for Spirit Tea with Anne Marie. And
It was
I loved having you here. And if you want to hang out at the mall next week, I'll be here, okay?
it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for letting me be here.
All right. Take care and bye-bye. And I
Bye-bye.
will
Take care.